recapping what was a busy and dynamic NBA trade deadline here on CBS Sports HQ. We do have a trade tracker for all the deals we're not talking about. Certainly there has been a ton of movement. You can head over to cbssports.com for that. I'm alongside Brad Botkin as well as joined by Colin Ward-Henninger. Let's talk winners and losers here as we wrap up trade deadline. Let's start with a winner, Brad. Who was a winner for you at the deadline?
Well, obviously the Phoenix Suns. They get Kevin Durant. I mean, that's just a monster deal. They give up 4 picks. I mean, realistically, they got Kevin Durant. I'm going to have to look at the actual nuances of the deal, but I think they got Durant for less than the Wolves paid for Rudy Gobert. So, if you look at this in perspective, the Suns picking him up in a Western Conference and really an entire NBA landscape that is wide open in terms of championship contenders. To bring in Kevin Durant completely moves the needle. We've used that phrase a lot here over the last half hour, and there's nobody that moves the championship needle like Kevin Durant. So the Suns are going to be tough. They lost some depth, but what he does for them is that they're a team that doesn't get into the paint, that doesn't score at the rim. They have to rely on jumpers. When you only have 2 guys that can do that, in Chris Paul and Devin Booker, it gets tough. But to add Kevin Durant, they now have no shortcomings other than depth, which could be a problem, but they're clearly the biggest winner.
Okay, so the Phoenix Suns for you. Colin, in terms of a winner for you, who was the big winner at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Suns, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are both winners because they were able to force their way out of situations and go to good teams. But Brad took the big one, so I'm going to go with a little bit of a smaller move. The Philadelphia 76ers. They are very close to being right up there with the Celtics and the Bucks in terms of Eastern Conference contenders. They took a piece in Matisse Thybulle, a defensive, basically only defense type of player, and turned him into Jalen McDaniels, who, regular NBA fans might not know a ton about him, but he is young, he is long, he is athletic. You don't lose a lot on the defensive end because he's a very good defensive player, and he can also stretch the floor by knocking down some threes. So yes, the Phoenix Suns made the big splashy move, as did the Dallas Mavericks. But this is a move that when you already have your superstars in place, and Joel Embiid and James Harden, a guy like Tyrese Maxey, adding around them is what makes a difference between, a second-round playoff exit and potentially winning a title. And a guy like Jalen McDaniels coming in, taking minutes from Thybulle, who is, up and down in the rotation, I think will really make a difference here. So a little bit of a deep cut, but I think the 76ers have really positioned themselves well to be an Eastern Conference contender with this move.
No, and I think it's a good point. I mean, there's going to be the splashy moves, but then you've also got the teams that are contenders that don't want to upset the balance of what they have because chemistry is such a huge part of it, and certainly adding little pieces here and there to kind of maybe get you over the hump is certainly something that's important, especially at the deadline. We see it in all the leagues. So on the other side of things, Colin, I'll start with you here. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets went from possible title contenders in the East to a team that is now in full rebuild mode, stockpiling picks. Are they the biggest losers for you here at the deadline?
Yeah, Brad and I were talking about this off air, but we, in terms of the actual moves that were made, there weren't a ton of losers. So if you're looking at big picture, yes, the Nets are probably the biggest loser of this deadline because they had 2 players who were very capable of winning them an NBA title this season. They proved over that stretch where they went 18-2 or something like that, where this team, when they're clicking, could have been a real contender, and now they are in full rebuild mode. They have a ton of pieces. They have a ton of draft picks. The trades themselves, they did very well. I love Mikal Bridges, whether they want to keep him or trade him for a ton of assets moving forward. I love Cam Johnson. Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie are good players that other teams are going to want to give assets to get them. So I think in terms of the actual moves that the Nets made, they did a good job. But yes, if you're looking at the big picture, going from a potential championship contender to rebuild mode in a matter of 2 or 3 days, you have to be the biggest loser of the trade deadline.
Okay, so he picks the obvious one. You had the Suns for winners, obvious one. Yeah. So Nets, obvious one for on the loser side. Who do you have as a team that didn't make good at the deadline?
Well, I think Colin's onto something here because it's sort of like the old saying, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And I think the teams that didn't get better in light of a guy like Kevin Durant going to Phoenix, Kyrie Irving going to the Mavericks, if you're Denver, if you're Memphis, these teams that we were talking about, they might be the favorites to come out of the West, but they didn't keep up with the Joneses, and so they suddenly now fall back, I think, in the conversation. So to me, that's a team that loses. You could argue that the Raptors were a loser because they weren't able to get off those players that everybody thought they were sort of the fulcrum of the trade deadline, and once they moved, everyone else did. But then Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving just completely hijacked the trade deadline, and when it ends, the Raptors still have all their guys. So now they have decisions to make in the offseason with Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent. But I wouldn't be so quick to label them a loser. I think we'll end up talking more about the Raptors, but there's already reports coming out that they think because the Eastern Conference lost a contender in Brooklyn, that maybe they can crawl in, get through the play-in or get a low 6 seed and maybe make a run in the playoffs. So I think that move, taking Brooklyn out of the equation, gave some people some ideas that maybe they should keep their guys.
Canadians are patient, right? We take that patient approach. So, okay, so as we look at the teams now, I mean, the rosters are set. It's time to settle in for the stretch run. The odds for the title run have been updated, and they'll probably continue to be updated as these moves continue to kind of trickle in. As mentioned, trade deadline tracker over on CBSSports.com. So as you look at these odds here, Brad, Celtics favorites, Suns favorites, then you got the Bucks, Nuggets, and 76ers. Nuggets were a team you kind of mentioned there. How do you like these odds? Do you think they're a fair reflection of where these teams are at right now?
Yeah, I think they're fair. I mean, I would have the Suns as the favorite, but I mean, I think this graphic indicates that this thing is still pretty wide open. There's probably, off the top of my head, there's 10 teams that can go into their war room right now and say, if things break our way, if the right matchup comes our way, if we stay healthy, if our guys get hot at the right time, all these circumstances come together, there are a lot of teams that can still make a case. So I think that reflects that. One of the teams that I think probably shouldn't be right in the middle of that is the Warriors. I think I like them getting Gary Payton the second back. But previously you asked me about the losers. That they're probably a team because they don't take a step forward. I don't think that they can keep up with a team like Phoenix now. So I don't know that I'd have them right there in the middle of that favorite conversation. But I think at the top that it's pretty indicative of a bunch of teams that are right up there.
Yeah, I think what stands out to me is the fact that the Celtics are still number one, right? They didn't do a whole lot at the trade deadline. They didn't have big splashy moves. This is a team that's just been really, really good, and they're going to lose Jaylen Brown for a little bit, but he should be healthy for the playoffs. And I think it shows that a team that has continuity, a team that made the NBA Finals, was the favorite to win the NBA Finals before Steph Curry ripped their hearts out, is a team that's going to be back in the mix again this season. And Phoenix made all these moves, the big move to get Kevin Durant. They still need to be healthy, right? And Chris Paul has proven that he has trouble making it through an entire playoff series healthy, an entire playoff run healthy. Devin Booker's had issues this year. We know about Kevin Durant's injury issues. And if one of those guys gets hurt, that knocks down their ceiling considerably. I think the Celtics, with Jason Tatum playing at an MVP level, who doesn't get talked about as an MVP a lot, they're just kind of slowly moving along with the best record in the league. And I think when we get to the playoffs, we're going to see that maybe, all this talk, will the Warriors be able to come back? How about the Nuggets? Are they good? I think the Celtics are going to show that they have a proven formula for winning and that they are deservedly the favorites to win the NBA title.
Interesting, too, the Mavs on that board, 14-1. Go and get Kyrie, but 14-1. I know probably Tim Doyle's probably going nuts because he likes he likes the Mavericks. But gentlemen, great stuff as always. Colin Ward-Henninger and Brad Botkin joining me here in the studio talking about the close of the NBA trade deadline here on HQ. As mentioned, full trade tracker over on CBSSports.com. We'll have more HQ coming up on the other side.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.